Good afternoon. My name is John Williamson, photographer and Profoto evangelist. I wanted to thank you all for coming out today to the webinar. So today we're going to talk about alternative lighting styles with the new Profoto Rfi Softboxes. See, I think all too often people get caught up in this traditional portraiture mode and they just use their softboxes for one specific use and one specific lighting pattern and so on. So what I want to do today is show you a couple quick setups that you can do that kind of breaks that mold a little bit. The first one I'm going to do is it was with the two Profoto 2x3 softboxes. And I actually shot a little bit earlier with our model Hope. And so let's take a look at that video real quick and we'll go over it after that. So for this lighting setup, I'm using two of the new Profoto Rfi boxes. I'm using the 2 foot by 3 foot, and I've put them in this over and under type of lighting setup. This is commonly called a clamshell lighting setup. In this type of setup, our box on top, the light on top, is going to be your main light source. This is going to be the one that's producing our lighting pattern, which in this instance is going to be set up like a butterfly lighting pattern. What that's going to do is it's going to accentuate the cheekbones and the jawline on our subject. It's a very feminine style of lighting. The lower light can be considered like a fill light. It's going to help fill in some of those shadows. But to give this more of a glamour type feel, what I've done is I've put a one-stop filter in here that's going to warm the light up. So I'm going to get this warm glow coming up from the bottom light. Now to make this kind of setup a little bit easier on me, I've rigged both of the lights up to one C-stand. What made this easier was Kupo has this new clamp called a 4-way clamp. And what this does is it just clamps around any tubular light stand or C-stand and allows you to put these different accessories on. I just used a long stud here and I put a grip head on here. Because I was able to do that and fasten onto a secure mount, I actually ran 2 grip arms with both the lights. This is going to make it a lot easier because our main stand is going to be off center. So instead of trying to fight a stand that's right in the middle of where we're trying to shoot, it's off to the side. And since we're using grip, C-stands, it's going to be a lot more stable than trying to use aluminum light stands. So when we're using these heavy lights, it's kind of a good idea to use heavier stands. So what I want to do now is invite our model Hope, have Hope come up, and we're going to get these lights set up. So Hope, if you can please. Now what I want to do is, just like any time you set up lights, I want to set them up one at a time. Since I'm using the Profoto D1 Airs, I'm actually able to turn the lights on and off individually so I can see right where that light's going to go. Again, I have these tuned into channel 1, and the bottom one is group B. So I can actually turn this head off so I know exactly where the light from my main light is going. So if you could take one small step forward for me. Perfect, right there. Look right here at me. What I want to do is I want to raise and lower this. Look right here at my finger. And what I'm looking for is that light right when it hits her eyes. I want to adjust my main light source so that until I see the light and the color of her eyes pop. That's what I'm looking for when I'm adjusting my main light. And now I could turn my lower light on here, and what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to see that warm glow as it comes up on the subject. So once I have the lights in the position I want them in, it's time to check my exposure. Great. So what I've done is I've actually recessed the dome on my 758 meter. What this will do is I'll isolate the light from each individual box so I can see what the difference is in exposure. And right now I'm running about a 2-stop difference. So it's about a 4-to-1 lighting ratio. And what I want to do now to get my main exposure, I'm going to stick the dome out, take a meeting right underneath her eye. So I'm going to be shooting this at ISO 100 at 125th of a second at f11. So now that I have my exposure, I don't have to guess, I don't have to take a bunch of test shots. I dialed in the exposure on my camera. I'll be shooting with a Nikon D3, and I'm using my 24 to 70 millimeter lens. With this type of a setup, because we are dealing with a limited opening, these are typically meant to be headshots. Head and shoulders, maybe a tight face shot, just depends on the look that you're going for. But remember, with this, we're not doing full body shots. We're not doing half body shots. This is a tight setup here for the shot. Great, look right here at me. Beautiful. Turn your chin towards me just a little bit. Go ahead and cross your arms in front of you. Yeah, just like that. Beautiful. Good. A little closer. Turn your chin to your right just a little bit. Right there. Perfect. Chin down just a little bit. Awesome. That's great. Thanks. So that was a clamshell lighting setup. Now that's become very popular over the years, and there's lots of different ways that you can do it. I chose to use two 2-foot by 3-foot softboxes, but that's not saying that you couldn't use 4x6s or 3x4s. It's also really popular using strip banks. One neat thing you can do is set up one softbox and simply use a reflector underneath. Use a gold reflector and get that same kind of warmth come up at your subject. And speaking of that warmth, actually what I want to do is I want to show you what this would look like with and without that bottom light, because it does create a unique look. So the image on the left-hand side of your screen, you see it with the top light alone. So you see the shadows under the nose, her cheekbones being accentuated. Also, on the one on the right-hand side then, you see the one with the colored gel in it. So the shadows are still present, but the exposure value is a little bit closer matching that of the main light. So your lighting ratios is slightly different in this one. You just get rid of a little of that contrast in it. But that warm glow really adds a nice glamour type look to it. So we've had some questions about the actual rig, the actual setup itself. So actually just over here to the side, I wanted to show you everything that I used right here. So this is just a 30-inch C-stand with the turtle base. I have on the very top, I just have a knuckle or a grip head with the grip arm coming out supporting the head. Now again, the nice thing about the Kupo grip arms is that end is faceted, so it has 6 sides to it. So once I tighten it down, I don't have to worry about this head rotating inadvertently. Then coming down, I have that 4-way clamp with a stud coming off that I attached another grip head with another grip arm. Again, all that allowed me to do was to come out a little bit and to get that stand out of the way, so it leaves me room to shoot right in between the softboxes. So what I'm going to do is take a couple more questions. I had a question about the meter that I'm using. What meter am I using? So I like to use the Sekonic 758. This is the one that I've just been using for years. Now, there's some more questions about the dome, whether the dome goes in or goes out. It's actually kind of interesting. After the last webinar that I did, Joe Brady and myself got into a conversation about how and when we use that dome. I never ever used it recessed. I always used it out. My thinking was, I'm photographing a 3-dimensional object. I want a 3-dimensional source when I'm metering my light. But he brought up a great point. When that's recessed, what I'm doing is isolating a single light in my setup. So when I do this, I can isolate just that top or just the bottom light. And that way I get a reading off of both. But when I go back and do my overall exposure reading for the actual setting of the camera, I'm going to leave it out. Because I want to meter all the light that's hitting that portion of the face of my subject. Let me refresh this. Why do I meter right below the eye? So for me, anytime I'm doing portraits, the mask of the face, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, that's the key. The eyes are the key to the portrait. So I want to make sure that I'm metering right for that brightest spot. So when I set up my lights, remember what I said, I raise and lower them until I see the saturation pop in the eyes. But when that happens, I'm setting the apex of the light essentially right at the eyes. That's going to be the brightest spot. So that's where I meter for. So in the lower box, when I put that gel in there, it was a Roscoe gel, and it was a full stop gel. I forget exactly what their number is on it, but it's a full stop warming filter that I had in there. Okay, and the other question was about how I'm triggering the lights. So for a wireless trigger, I'm using the Profoto Air remote, and what this allows me to do, this just slides right on top of the camera, and it'll remotely fire your strobes. But the neat thing about the Profoto Air system is, especially in a setup like that, I can actually control the power level of the lights independently of each other. So what I do is I set them both for the same channel, and then I set each light on a different group. There are 8 different channels and 6 different groups I can use. So that way, when I'm shooting, if I have to make an adjustment, I don't have to stop the flow of the shoot, the tempo of the shoot, to pull the box down and make a change. I can actually change it right from there. Another neat thing is too, when I'm doing my meter readings, if it's not exactly what I want, I can make the change before I ever even begin shooting, just to dial it in exactly what I want to do. And let me see here real quick. What about shooting a model with glasses? So glasses are really interesting. We always have this problem. Well, the reflection in the glasses themselves. Light's really neat the way it works. It doesn't matter what source it is. It's always going to behave the same way. That's physics. Light is always going to be governed by the same laws of physics. So there's this law that says the angle of incidence, the angle that light arrives at, is the same angle as reflection. So for me, a foolproof way to eliminate that is pop the lenses out. If you pop the lenses out, you get the same look, but without the glass in there. Sometimes that's not possible. You can't do it. So what a little trick you can do is take the arms of the glasses and just push them up a little bit. What you're doing is you're changing the angle of the front of the lens so that you're changing the angle at which it reflects at. And a lot of times you can eliminate that altogether that way. So just a couple neat little tricks. So somebody asked, why a 4:1 lighting ratio, and do I have any more images at a different ratio? And I don't right now. That's the ratio I chose when I shot. The 4:1 just means that it's like a 2-stop difference in between there. I didn't want a really hard contrasty image, especially when I'm using that warming filter coming up. It's more of a glamour type shot anyways. So it's not real edgy, not real contrasty. So I still wanted enough to emphasize the cheekbones and the jawline, but not to create, like I said, that edgy type factor to it. So for our next setup, what I've chosen are the 2 1x6 softboxes. And again, we did a little photo shoot. So let's take a look at that video, and I'll come back to more of your questions. So for this setup, I'm using 2 1-foot by 6-foot softboxes. These light shaping tools create a very long linear light source. So what I've done is I've set 2 of them up with about a 1-foot gap in between them. Now I've feathered them in, so when I bring the model in, what we're going to look at is both of these are going to be casting 2 catch lights in the eye, 2 vertical catch lights on either side of the pupil. Now we want to kind of adjust the height and the width that they're apart so we're not blocking too much of the pupil of the eye. Again, this type of unique setup is all about the catch lights. We still want to have directionality to the light. We don't want it to be completely flat. So I had to make sure that my light on the left is set so it's about a stop brighter than the light on the right. This will still provide directionality and give some depth to the image as well. So what I want to do now is invite Hope. Have you come on up? Since these softboxes are so long, I really don't have to adjust the height of them to get that perfect spot for the eyes. We're dealing with a huge light source here, and we're only photographing a small area. What I have to worry about is the horizontal setup, the lateral, because I want to watch the way the catch lights are reflected in her eye. I'll have you look right here. And the key to this is we want to look at and make sure that they're even on both sides of the eye, or as even as possible. They're never going to be perfectly symmetrical. So now that we have the boxes in place, I want to take a meter reading to see exactly where we're at. Great. And again, we're about 1 stop difference apart, and we're going to be shooting at ISO 100 at 125th of a second at f9. So I got my camera set, my exposure's dialed in based on my meter. So now I can go ahead and start shooting. Oh, look right here, look right here. That's great. Now I'm going to check the back of my camera. I'm not checking it for exposure. I know that's dialed in. What I'm checking for are the catch lights in the eyes. So the only thing I use the back of my camera for is to check for composition, and in this instance, making sure those catch lights are where I want them. Big smile right here. Beautiful, that's great. So just to sum up, I've chosen the 1 foot by 6 foot softboxes for the style and the look of the catch lights they're going to leave in the eyes. This can be, with both of these boxes so close to my subject, this has the potential of being a very flat, very dull image. But what I'm going to do is, I'm actually going to vary the exposure from one side to the other, make sure I still have directionality. So that's actually one of my favorite setups to use. I love the way the catch lights look in the eyes. Now I'm going to answer some of your questions about it here. Actually, we had some questions about catch lights themselves. A lot of people associate catch lights with just that pinpoint reflection of light, just that really circular look. The catch lights with this particular setup, they are going to be long, they're going to be a little bit more diffused. You're not going to have that really hard catch light. It's just a different look. So there's nothing wrong with it. They're still considered catch lights, but yes, they're going to be a little bit more diffused. It's not going to be quite as hard. Question was, do I have 3 lights set up? And the answer was no. I actually just had the 2. A lot of times what I might do is stick a 3rd light right behind my subject and point it right up at the back of the head. What that'll do is create that halo look, that rim light, but that halo look all around the hair. Just a different style, just a different look. That might be more important if I have a subject with a darker hair. The darker your subject's hair is, especially in this setup, I'm using that dark gray background. I don't want the exposure value of the background to match too closely the exposure value of the hair. You'll lose the top of the head. In that instance, the rim light or that hair light's even more important at that point. Question is, can you control the lights from an iPad? And unfortunately not right now. There's no controller for the iPad. Now, Profoto with the Air remote, or I'm sorry, the Air module, you can take an Air USB, plug it into your computer, use your computer to control the power of the lights. There's even a module you could put into Capture One software where you can control your lights from inside the Capture One software program. But as of right now, nothing we could do on an iPad or an iPhone. But yes, you can from your computer. So another question is, can this be done with standard softboxes? And the answer is yes, absolutely. You can just type this type of setup with any softboxes. I like using strip banks for this because I know that I'm going to get colored part of the eye both before and after that catch light. The problem I think I might have with the bigger boxes is you'll lose too much of that. Remember how we said it's more of a diffused catch light? Well, I don't want the entire eye to be covered with that light. I just want a smaller portion of it too. Another question is, why do I use the 1x6 softboxes? Well, the 1x6 is a little bit more versatile. So I've always believed in having the right tool for the right job. But with 1x6 strips, I could do, just like I did here, a nice tight face shot. Or if I wanted to do a full body here, I could pull them back a little bit, lower them down to the floor, and now I have a full body light I can use also. I just think they're incredibly versatile tools. And actually, with the new RFI boxes, they have a whole range. So everything from this 1 by 1.3 foot box all the way to 5 foot octabanks. And another neat thing they did was they came out with this soft grids, also called like an egg crate grid. Let me turn that so you guys can see it here. What this does is it redirects the light. I think I talk about in the next video a little bit, but light comes out of a softbox at a 105-degree angle. Well, now we're taking it down to just a 40-degree angle. Helps us control the light more. So we don't just have them for the strips, we have them for every softbox we offer, which is kind of cool. See if we have any more questions here real quick. All right, so we're going to move on to our last video, our final setup, and we'll take some more of your questions afterwards. Now for the final setup, I'm using the same 1x6 softboxes, but instead of using them as my main lights, I've pulled them back and I'm going to set them up behind my model as rim lights. Now because light comes out of the softbox at about a 105-degree angle, what will happen is, since I'm using those as dual rim lights, that will have a tendency to wrap around on my subject and contaminate part of the face that I don't want to illuminate with those lights. So we've put on soft grids. They're actually a 40-degree soft grid, so it's going to take that light from 105 down to just a 40-degree angle. This will concentrate the light just on the back of my subject. Now, if I have them set up properly, what I'm going to get is this highlight all the way down my subject, and sometimes, depending on how you have your subject turn their face, it can come up into the skin a little bit. That's fine with me. It gives a little edge to it. What I don't want is that stray light to come up and hit the nose. I don't want to illuminate that any more than I need to. So those are just my rim lights. As my main light, I've chosen a 1 foot by 1.3 foot softbox. But instead of having the inner and outer diffusion panels, I've taken all of those out. So now what I'm using is just that bare bulb with that silver interior. Because it's a smaller box and it's got that hard specular light to it, we are going to get, like I said, a harder light and much more specular. So the tonality of the skin is going to be completely different. Just because we have soft boxes doesn't mean we can't mix up the way that we use them. So with these small boxes, they look great with, like I said, those diffusion panels ripped out of them. What I want to do now is bring our model in. So Hope, if you can come in, please. Just like any time that you set up your lights, again, it's very important to set them up one at a time so you can see what each light is doing individually. So for this first part, I'm going to turn my main light off, and I want to look and see just how those rim lights are affecting my subject, where the light is wrapping. Now, because of the way Hope has her hair done, it makes it really easy on me, because that hair is going to act as a natural barrier from that light wrapping around too much onto her face. So now that I have those in the correct position, and to get them like that, what I've done is I've taken the light on the right side, the rim light on the right side, and I've aimed it at her left shoulder, and I've crossing both of them behind her. What that does is it takes the apex of the light, or its brightest point, and I'm throwing it past the opposite side. This lets the light just fall back onto her. So I don't get, again, just minimizing that wrapping effect. So now, if I turn my main light on, this, like I said, is going to be a hard specular light. So we have to watch out where those shadows are going. It's a little bit more critical when you're dealing with a smaller, harder light source. Again, anytime we set up our main light, what I want to do is I want to start with it higher than it needs to be and just lower it into position until I see just the bright light of her eyes, the color of her eyes pop. That's how I know it's right where I want it. The eyes are, for me, the key to the portrait. So I want you to look right here. Perfect, right there. Great. Now for this shot, what I also want to do is I want to have Hope looking off camera just a little bit. This is just going to add just a little bit different dynamic to the photo. Again, for this type of setup, I'm concentrating just on a headshot. So now that I have all my lights in position, I'm going to use my meter and I'm going to determine what my correct exposure is going to be. Again, same thing as we did for the first one. I'm going to put the dome in so I can isolate each of the back rim lights to make sure that they're even with each other. I don't have one brighter than the other. Come over here. Okay, both of those are at f9. Now I'm going to put the dome out to determine the exposure of my main light source. You always want to determine the exposure of your main light source under the eye on the side of the face that the main light is on. So we're going to do that right over here. And we're right at f9. So I have all three of my lights set to just about the same exposure on my subject. That's because Hope's hair isn't super dark where I had to pump up those rim lights. Conversely, if her hair was very light, she had platinum hair, I might have to dial down the rim lights so as not to blow them out too much. But because she has this light blonde hair, or this light brown hair, what I can do is set the exposure just about the same, just to create those highlights. So we have the exposure dialed into our camera now. I'm going to be shooting at ISO 100 at 125th of a second at f9. So now that we're dialed in, what I want you to do is turn your head slightly to the left. Great, just like that. Right here at me. Perfect. Great, now I'm going to go. Can you take your eyes slightly off camera? Look right here at my finger. Perfect, right there. That's great. Great. Now all right, so that was the final setup here. And actually, one thing I want to do is, Rick, can we pull up that first image one more time real quick? So with this image, I know that I said in the video that I don't like that light to hit the subject's nose. And that's true, I don't. I don't want to overemphasize the size of my subject's nose. But when I saw this image, I realized that it goes against what I said to you guys, but I loved the image. Sometimes it works. Don't be so caught in your own like tight little world that, okay, this didn't go right so the image doesn't work. No, I actually really like that image, even though some of the technical aspects didn't match exactly what I was looking for. I still really liked it. It's okay to think outside the box like that. It's okay that something didn't go right. You have a little happy accident, so it works. So we're going to answer some questions here. Wouldn't I use a reflector instead of the softbox? And absolutely, if I was on location and I had a Magnum reflector with me, yeah, that's one of my favorite modifiers. But with the softbox, you could still get that hard specular light. So like the inside of here, we have the flash tube is actually exposed, and we have that silver interior. You're going to get that specularity. You're going to get that tonality on the skin tone. So just because you don't have something doesn't mean you can't improvise. And also, try this with larger boxes. It doesn't have to be something small. If you're doing a full body, but you still want that hard specular light, rip the diffusion panels out of the larger box. See how it looks. Experiment. So how does that diffusion panel change the question is, how does removing the diffusion panel change the catch light? Well, this isn't going to be a square catch light anymore. It's actually kind of neat the way it looks. You'll see the round flash tube in there. We have a frosted plate in front of the flash tube on the D1s. You'll see that, but you'll also see each panel. So it almost looks like an iron cross with this circle right in the center of it. It's a unique looking catch light. Again, something I like when doing these alternate styles. So somebody asked what kind of clamp I'm using on the C-stands in that first example. So I have one right here. This is called a 4-way clamp. This is brand new from Kupo. So the way this works is you just depress this button, and this will actually attach around any tubular stand. With these 4 receptacles, these 4 slots right here, they have these different accessories that I can actually just slide in and then tighten down. So maybe I just mount a head directly to this. Since I wanted it off to the side, what I did was I mounted the grip head so I could run a grip arm. It's just another way of rigging gear onto your stands, or if you're on location, to some place in your environment you're shooting in. Oh, pardon me. So what f-stop does he use for each individual softbox? So what I was looking for, like I said in the video, my rim lights, when they're behind, I want, for her hair, the color of her hair, I wanted the exposure value to match pretty much what my main light was. If you have somebody with light blonde hair and your exposure value is too great, too much above what your main light is from your rim lights, you're going to blow the hair out. You're going to lose detail. That's what I didn't want to have happen. Also, if you have somebody with really dark hair and you try to match the value, you might not see it. It might not show up as much. So somebody with dark hair, your rim lights might have to have more power to get the look you're going for. So that's why they don't always match. Her hair, the color of her hair, it worked out perfect that having the exposure values matched worked. So I'm getting questions on exposure. In photography, when we're dealing with studio strobes, when we set our exposure, there's 3 key things. You have your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO. Now, since we're in a studio environment, we have all the light that we need. We're applying all the light. So we can shoot at ISO 100. We might as well get the best quality that we can. Next is our shutter speed. Well, our shutter speed is actually going to be determined by our camera. You see, we have something called a sync speed. So what that does is that allows the sensor to be exposed during the full duration of the light. So your shutter speed is already predetermined. It's called your sync speed. For most 35mm DSLRs, that's going to be 125th of a second. Now, absolutely, I could have taken my shutter speed down to just 100th of a second. It wouldn't have made a difference in this scenario. But if you tend to go higher than that, what you can do is you can get too fast of a shutter speed and you start to get a black bar or black haze down at the bottom or the side of your image. And that's caused from the shutter actually closing before all the light has a chance to expose the sensor. Another question is about how I have the gels mounted in the softbox. In this instance, we had an 18-inch by 24-inch piece of gel. It was really big. I actually just laid it in there and it worked perfect. A lot of times what you can do is just use binder clips and just clip it on the inside. As long as that gel is covering the flash tube, as the light leaves the flash tube, you're going to affect the color of that on the way out. So it's fine. So again, binder clips work well. Like I had, if it's just a big enough piece, just lay it in there. So the question is, do you aim the rims at the near shoulder or aim across to the far shoulder? So for me, in this instance, I aimed the rim across her body to the far shoulder. I feathered it past her body because I didn't want too much of the light to wrap around. Now that might be something you're looking for, a really hard edge, kind of an edgy picture. Then yeah, you might want it so more of the light comes forward on the face. But for this instance, I did. I just aimed it towards that far shoulder. Another question was, can I do this without those egg crate grids? And yes, you absolutely can do them without the grids in there. But keep in mind, we're changing the angle of light. Since I'm working in a confined space or a smaller space here, I have to worry about what light's hitting my background also. So I had to worry about the light on my subject, but also the light on my background. Now, if I could have brought her 15, 20 feet off of the background, nothing to worry about. But since she was only 4 or 5 feet from the background, I didn't want lights from that rim light to spill on there as I was feathering it off. Again, these are just tools we use to help control the light. Okay. Have you tested that the light meter is really only seeing one light? I have seen videos where Joe Brady covers the other light source with his hand. Absolutely. If you have the opportunity to actually shut off each individual light and meter them individually, that's great. That works perfect. Again, that little trick of recessing it, I actually got from actually speaking with Joe. The neat thing about the air remotes, again, is one thing you can do, if I want to isolate each light, is I can just turn the lights on and off as I'm shooting from my camera position. So it's a quick way to do that also. So what is needed to get the D1s to sync at more than a 500th of the air controller and leaf shutters? So with the air controller, the sync speed is going to be determined by your camera. Now, there are other, Pocket Wizard has some other devices that you can use to actually increase the sync speed a little bit. That's kind of not the scope of this webinar, and it's a little bit too in-depth. I know that we have webinars online that you can see that cover that as well. So without egg crate grids, will the rim lights flare the camera? And that's absolutely a possibility. Since I feathered it past, if you're not feathering it quite as much and that light gets close to in frame, absolutely, you can get flare on the camera. So we actually use what's called a flag it off, or a black block, and just cover that up from the perspective of the camera. So you're just putting your camera in shade. If that happens to you in your studio, just cover the light up from the perspective of the camera with one of these black blocks or the flags. And another question was, are the D1s the same power? All 500s, all 1000s, or are they different values? So I was shooting with all 500 watt second units. Profoto makes 3 different power levels. I was shooting all at the same one, and so, but I was varying the different power levels. So for this instance, the power level of my main light is going to be dramatically different than the power level of my rims, even though the exposure value was the same. because I have no diffusion panels and that flash tube is exposed to my subject. This light was also closer to my subject than the rim lights were. So just because my rim lights were, I needed to power those up higher in order to get that same exposure value because they're a little bit further away and I had those diffusion panels in there. So I want to thank everybody for joining me here today. Again, if you want to view this webinar at a later date, you can go on to the Profoto archives and you can view it on there. I want to thank you all for coming. Have a great day.